Comme nous diffusons cette conférence de presse sur le web, je vous demanderai d'utiliser le micro à chaque côté de la salle. On vous demanderait de limiter à une question et une relance. Et libre à vous de poser la question dans la langue de votre choix. Before asking your question, please state your name and affiliation, and the governor will be happy to answer your questions in both official languages. Alors, on va commencer avec Stéphane des Affaires.
Bonjour, M. Poloz. J'avais une question pour vous. Aux États-Unis, la théorie de la New Monetary Policy, l'idée qu'on puisse s'endetter autant qu'on veut l'endettement public si ça ne provoque pas d'inflation, il n'y a pas de problème. Vu que vous êtes là, je suis un peu curieux de voir ce que vous pensez de cette théorie-là.
Est-ce que c'est déjà? Oui, OK. Pour le moment, c'est juste une question de staff dans les deux organisations qui partagent les recherches et franchement, on travaille exactement les mêmes sujets dans les deux pays. Alors, c'est un temps très spécial pour les recherches sur la politique monétaire. Alors, moi, j'ai aucun jugement en ce moment de ces choses-là, mais je regarde la recherche avec beaucoup d'intérêt.
OK. Dans votre rapport, vous avez dit que, bon, on vit une période difficile pour l'économie canadienne, mais vous avez bon espoir que ça se redresse au cours de la deuxième moitié d'année. Est-ce que c'est toujours quelque chose que vous envisagez là, avec les nouvelles données que vous avez depuis?
La politique concernant le taux d'inflation, c'est-à-dire?
L'économie en général, que la situation économique irait mieux au cours de la deuxième moitié d'année. Est-ce que c'est...
Oui, pour le moment, on n'a pas de nouvelles prévisions depuis notre rapport en janvier. On a des prévisions fraîches en avril. Mais on regarde les données. Naturellement, les données sont comme la mer, c'est ebb and flow. Récemment, certainement que le secteur des ménages était moins fort que nos attentes. Mais en même temps, il y a des effets spéciaux dans les données. Alors, il faut analyser tout cela avant d'avril. Mais pour le moment, si on regarde que nous avons 2 trimestres de faiblesse, c'est vraiment un trimestre. Le deuxième, c'est en effet le fait d'ajustement des inventaires, principalement les inventaires de pétrole en Alberta. Alors, avec cela, on regarde les données mensuelles et la neige commence à disparaître. On va voir les données mensuelles plus positives.
Merci.
Merci. Alison?
Thank you. Alison Lambert with Reuters. You said the path back to the neutral rate is highly uncertain. What message should markets take from that language, and are you on hold for the time being?
Well, we've been at the same interest rate since last October, precisely because the data have been giving us some mixed messages. In some respects, we can point to global phenomena which may be affecting everybody's perception, and that would be, as I said in my talk, primarily the risk around global trade and the consequences of a more, let's say, an escalated trade war. So this appears to be slowing down investment plans, not just here, but everywhere. And that's the one thing we all have in common. That's why it's also highly correlated. So that, of course, gives one pause while you watch and see how those things develop. But as we've said over and over, we're data dependent. So it depends on how the economy delivers. And, just let's not lose sight of the fact that the labor market remains extremely strong. We're seeing good signs on the wage front, once we take the oil-producing provinces out of the data. So there are encouraging signs along with the more business-related sentiment-type indicators. So it's a bit of a mix, and we'll just continue to analyze that and to weigh those data as they arrive. And we'll have to wait and see. April, we should be able to give a clearer picture, certainly about the oil sector. that'll help us a lot.
And speaking of the oil sector, does the rebound in oil prices give the bank greater confidence that the slowdown in the economy will prove temporary?
Well, in our outlook that we published in January, the only actual reason for that two-quarter slowdown was because of developments in the energy sector. It's the main one. I shouldn't say the only, because there were some downward adjustments to the housing side on the outlook. But primarily it was about oil. And so that dynamic is one which it's important to understand. It's not just a matter of arithmetic. Is the price a little stronger? That matters because part of the analysis is the income flow from exports of oil. And if that is depressed, that's one of the channels by which the shock affects us. But there are others, and in particular, it's the sentiment around future investment in the oil sector, which may or may not be restored just because of a bit of an uptick in prices. Okay, the plans get made, and they're kind of longer range plans. They don't turn on a dime per se. So we have to watch the investment track separately from the revenue track. For now, nothing really new to say about that. I think April's the best place because it's more of a complex, slower moving analysis around investment.
Thank you. Pierre-Luc, TC Médias.
Oui, bonjour, M. Poloz. Je me demandais, les caisses de retraite ont beaucoup de difficultés dans l'environnement de bateau actuel, qui dure depuis quand même plusieurs années, de la difficulté à obtenir des rendements conséquents sur les titres à revenus fixes, obligés de prendre davantage de risques dans d'autres catégories d'actifs. Est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui préoccupe la Banque du Canada?
Oui, certainement. Franchement, les chocs qui ont touché l'économie depuis la crise financière, c'est hors de notre contrôle. Et la réaction, c'est une combinaison de politique monétaire et politique budgétaire. Et avec cette combinaison, on a des résultats d'une période très prolongée de taux d'intérêt très bas. C'est un effet que c'est juste le fonctionnement de l'économie. Il n'y a rien à faire à ça, sauf que pour faire les choses nécessaires pour encourager un retour, un bon port, comme j'ai mentionné. Et dans ce domaine-là, on verra les taux d'intérêt plus normaux, en donnant le taux d'inflation, etc. Merci.
Greg?
Greg Quinn, Bloomberg News. Good afternoon. Are you a bit of a global outlier still talking about the need to get interest rates back up and back up to neutral, where other central banks seem to be a bit more cautious? Is there something that makes Canada's prospects a little bit brighter than other countries?
Well, I don't know about the premise. I mean, it depends. The situation varies from country to country, as it has, of course, almost every year since the financial crisis. And so every central bank is data dependent in the way we describe. What we're saying is that if our forecast holds up, that is that our moderation is a temporary one, and we get that a bit more movement in exports and investment, we're going to see a more prolonged period while we're very close to home, to our potential. Inflation's on target. And so it would be less necessary for interest rates to be stimulative. And so I think that presumption lies behind most central banks' analysis, but it's a question of what data show up in a particular country. So we have various elements of a global trade war already in place that may affect some countries faster than others. Take, for instance, Germany was one of the first countries to demonstrate the symptoms of slower investment because of the trade war. Well, something like 80% of the companies on the DAX rely on more than 50% on international revenues to grow their companies. So they're highly trade-dependent stock market set of companies. And so other countries, it's less the case. And so some countries show these symptoms faster than others. But I think that's all it is.
Secondly, sir, your speech touched on housing markets and signs perhaps of froth. You may have seen that some industry groups have said that the housing market is almost slowed too much, or that homes are unaffordable for millennials, and they've said that some of these rules should be dialed back to help people get into the market. Is it the right time to loosen up some of the restrictions on the housing market?
Well, I mean, I think that we're still analyzing these data as they unfold. It's only been a year, or just barely a year, since the new B20 guidelines went into force. And of course, we have behind the scenes some other changes in Toronto and in Vancouver, which are very local. So that combination, you know, is what's at work. Bearing in mind that before that happened, if we were talking about affordability of houses, houses were, you know, house prices were going up very, very quickly. There were bidding wars and fear of missing out and all that stuff. I think that's a much more dangerous situation for affordability than one in which where we're debating whether the interest rate requirement is, you know, this much above the 5-year rate or what have you. I mean, we're talking about a much smaller element in the big picture compared to when prices were rising at 10 or 15% per year. So I think people have to think a little bit about what counterfactuals might have looked like. I think, well, that's really important to be able to do. Are we better off in this situation than we would have been if we hadn't done those things? And it's a really hard thing to answer. I mean, I can't give you an answer per se, but to say that we need to analyze the bits through more time as we come to an understanding of that before we start questioning yet again whether we have those parameters set. I can tell you that underwriting of mortgages, the quality has improved significantly, and that matters a lot because the vulnerability of the economy to a normalization of interest rates was becoming extremely high. That indebtedness meant that just a normal movement in interest rates, not a big fluctuation that you have during big cyclical episodes, but just a normalization of interest rates. That would have put a lot of heat into those renewals, and so I think we're getting every month we're getting to a more and more stable, less vulnerable, more resilient situation in the stock of debt.
Thank you. Kim?
Thank you. Thanks. Kim McCrail from the Wall Street Journal. I wanted to follow up on housing to begin with. In some of what you talked about today, obviously housing was brought up in the monetary policy report and some of your comments after the last rate decision. But has anything changed at this point to make the bank and to make you more concerned about housing than you may have been a month ago or several months ago? I'll leave it there.
Okay. No, I would say though that the watching brief is primarily around housing resales, and so one of the way this works, we put these new rules in place, and we knew that there'd be more than one way that people would react. Way number one would be people would say, well, I can't afford this much of a mortgage now because the bank can only give me this much of a mortgage, therefore I can't afford to buy this house, but I'm just going to look for a house that costs less. That could be a smaller house or a house in a different neighborhood. It could be a condo instead of a house. It could be all those adjustments. On the other side of the market, in resales, there's people trying to sell their houses. And, you know, they might be, let's say there are people in my age group that think, wow, house prices are really high. If I sold my house, I could downsize and I could pocket some money. Well, they're, of course, in a position to say, well, it looks like I might not sell my house now because things are cooling down. Well, I'll just accept a lower price. And that lower price may be just the ticket for that first individual we talked about who needs to find something that fits into their mortgage. And so we've got all those things happening at once. And how much of it happens kind of depends on how much froth there was in the first place. And we know in Vancouver and in Toronto there was froth, but you know, fundamentals are strong too. So it's hard to distinguish between what's real and what's just speculative. And we talked about speculative expectations or, you know, extrapolative expectations driving some housing decisions. So this is the intangible thing that's in there that we can't quite know in advance what it will be. And so what we're watching is for the market to settle down, both sides of the market, so we can say, there, now what's left? Now that's fundamental, okay? And so that just takes more data. It's taking a little longer than I expected, but I think that's a sign that there was more froth than I thought. So if there's something that's been learned through here, it's that. And another learning is that in the sector for new houses, it's easier said than done to adjust. So if people are showing up at your building site saying, well, all these houses are kind of big and the price tag is kind of mortgage like that, and the builder, you know, you'd think the builder would say, well, I'll just build 10 smaller ones in this area instead of 10 bigger ones, but it's not like that. It's all planned. It's permitted that way. And so that adjustment process is a much slower one in the new build sector. But you notice that housing starts have remained quite solid. And so that just shows you that underneath the market is a strong demographic, strong job growth. There's a growing market for homes. And the sorting out is taking longer, but I'm confident that it's happening.
I wanted to turn to investment intentions. If you think about the Bank of Canada's expectation that investment will pick up over this year, and some of the concerns you've highlighted today around trade policy and how that might hurt business sentiment, can you speak to that concern?
Well, so I think, as you know, in our forecast for over 2 years, we've had a channel which is, which in effect explains why investment has been softer than our model suggested it would be. And that channel is due to the uncertainty primarily in Canada around NAFTA, but increasingly over the past 12 months, it's been around the global trading system more generally. And this is the same channel which appears to be operating in other countries. And as I described in the room there, it's one of those intangible things that are hard to measure, but when enough companies tell you that they're holding off on a decision because of that uncertainty, well, it begins to show up in real numbers at some point because it's money they're deciding not to spend. So we know that's there. We've had it in our model for some time, and we're not assuming it's going to go away. What we have built in our model is that the signing of CUSMA and everyone's hope that it will be ratified should have reduced some of that concern, because like a year ago it was much less certain. And coupled with the new CCA rules that the government put in place, those things together kind of suggest that we'll have, in the non-energy sector, stronger investment this year. And that is, I think, that's been confirmed for me, at least with the conversations I'm having. Okay, so that's not, we have to watch the data, so we don't assume the answer. We want the data to prove it to us. And so that's why we don't just put in a really rosy picture for investment. We just think it's going to be okay. Frankly, there's plenty of upside risk if all of the uncertainties start to go away. So if the negotiations with China result in a series of MOUs that take some important things off the table, this is the kind of thing that would make everybody feel better about the future. And as I said, sentiment can go down quickly. The sentiment can recover quite quickly if you take away those things that are causing people to be concerned.
Merci. Thank you. Justin Hayward, CBC.
Justin Hayward, CBC.
Justin Hayward, CBC.
We're all following SNC-Lavalin very closely, as I'm sure you are. It's a huge company, employs 9,000 people directly, and hundreds, if not thousands, of other jobs depend on it. What's the impact on the Canadian economy if a company that large were to fail?
Well, I don't, off the top of my head, have any sense of you know, I understand 9,000 jobs is a pretty significant number for any firm. But I haven't done any analysis around what sort of a shock that would mean for the macroeconomy. I just haven't. So, sorry, I haven't got an answer for you.
No sense whatsoever, that many jobs disappearing?
Well, 9,000 jobs needs to be kept in context. Like how many jobs did we create, let's say, in the month of January was 67,000 net. That's with a decline of something like, I think it was 16,000 in Alberta. And so you know, the ebb and flow in the labor market is a pretty big number. But of course, these might be primarily engineers and so on, which, you know, there would be an adjustment process to any such loss, of course. But I don't have any numbers for you, Justin.
Okay, fair enough. Given that it's SNC-Lavalin or any company that large takes up that space in the economy, we're seeing more and more of these deferred prosecution agreements take place in the Western world and Western economies. So what's the value to an economy like the Canadian economy to offering one of those agreements to a large company like that?
I'm sorry, that sounds like a question for some sort of a lawyer or something. I'm really not equipped to address questions like that for you.
Okay.
Fair enough.
On va prendre une dernière question. Monsieur Desrosiers. Le Devoir.
Bonjour, Éric Desrosiers, Le Devoir. Dans votre discours, vous avez parlé d'une nouvelle mesure de croissance exposée au risque. Puis, en disant, bon, en l'appliquant entre autres au scénario fiction, si on n'avait pas augmenté les taux d'intérêt en 2015, 2016 et tout ça. Je me demandais, cette mesure-là, actuellement, elle a l'air de quoi? Quelle est la partie de la croissance canadienne qui est exposée au risque?
J'ai essayé de l'expliquer en termes très communs durant le congrès. C'est un concept assez difficile parce que c'est une distribution de possibilités. Et ce qu'on parle, c'est dans le tail de cette distribution. Il y a un pourcentage, par exemple, on prend de 5% dans le tail de la distribution. Et ça, c'est la probabilité de 5% qu'on va voir, c'est ce scénario très difficile pour l'économie. Et ce qu'on voit, c'est que la distribution, quand on va avoir une période de taux d'intérêt bas prolongée, la distribution change à droite, the mean change. Okay? Alors, comme j'ai dit, le taux de croissance serait plus élevé. Right? En même temps, le tail augmente. C'est un concept très spécialisé. La distribution, c'est généré par un modèle avec en fait une méthode de bootstrapping, avec tout ça. Alors, c'est technique. Et mon argument, c'est que quand le tail augmente, ça augmente la probabilité d'un scénario adverse. On a aussi un sens de si les risques financiers sont manifestés, quel serait ce scénario? Et la distance entre les deux, c'est le growth at risk. Et ce qu'on mesure, ce n'est pas vraiment le niveau. En principe, c'est possible d'avoir le niveau. Mais c'est très dépendant au modèle, etc. Alors, c'est une notion qui c'est le changement de niveau qui est notre indice le plus important. Si ça augmente, ça augmente par combien? Alors ça, c'est pas un bon trade-off entre l'autre politique qui a un taux d'intérêt un peu plus élevé, moins d'accumulation de ces risques, etc. Alors, c'est une notion comme ça. C'est pas vraiment une notion précise pour dire, oh, 1 point de pourcentage ou 2 points de pourcentage qui est à risque. Mais en principe, c'est possible. Si tu regardes le papier original, il y a des estimats là, qui sont là. Mais moi, je n'utilise pas ces niveaux, c'est le changement qui m'intéresse. Ça va?
OK. Donc, j'entends bien que vous auriez du mal à me donner un chiffre, un pourcentage ou quoi que ce soit. Et j'entends bien aussi que la situation aurait été pire si on n'avait pas bougé. Ouais. Mais quand même, si on avait une appréciation, ouais, même sans chiffre, sans proportion, ouais, actuellement, la croissance vous apparaît. Ouais. Il y a une proportion, il y a, ouais, un niveau de risque qui est notable, important, faible. Comment vous le qualifieriez?
Assez important, parce que c'est le scénario qu'on analyse très soigneusement dans le FSR, okay, le review du système financier, RSF. Et dans ce scénario, on regarde un scénario qui est peu probable, mais c'est s'il arrive. Alors, c'est un scénario comme on parle de scénario où nous avons une trappe de liquidité, là, où l'économie reste avec une croissance minime, comme un scénario japonais, par exemple. Et ça prend beaucoup de temps pour ajuster le système financier et les balance sheets pour arriver dans une trajectoire plus normale. Mais pour le quantifier, c'est peut-être pas nécessairement une récession, par exemple. Mais c'est peut-être un demi-point ou un point de pourcentage, mais pour une période très prolongée. Alors, c'est cette période où c'est très, très difficile pour la Banque centrale de recommencer les efforts d'avoir la cible pour l'inflation. Alors, habituellement, c'est le manque d'ajustement qui est le problème. L'économie est stuck dans ce sens-là. Et c'est très difficile à dire quel est le montant actuel de output qui est perdu. En principe, c'est possible. Mais moi, je n'ai pas les chiffres à la tête pour vous.
Merci, gouverneur Poloz. Merci à tous. Bon après-midi.
Ouais, merci.